In this video we're going to be looking at modularizing your projects by having multiple source files. And what I mean by that is at the moment most of you are probably writing programs where you have main function, maybe some other functions down here, but everything's located within one .c file. What we're going to do is we're going to introduce a new item into this project. So right clicking the project, add new item, which unfortunately you can't see, but add new item off the side of the screen, and we're going to add a C file. And let's say this is our LCD, or let's call this LCD. So this is our LCD source file. And within this one we might have void setup LCD, for example. And I'm not going to pass anything to this particular one, but this function is going to do some tasks like initializing an I2C LCD. And we might have some other functions like void write string to LCD, and we pass it a char to a string, so this one would write to the LCD a string, however you would do that via I2C, and maybe you might have void disable LCD. Okay, but key things here are that we have multiple functions. Right, so we are writing modular code already by not having everything within one huge function, but noting that we have all of this code located within lcd.c and not within our main one, which for this example is called video demo.c. So one of the nice things is that these functions go over quite quite large and complicated with quite a lot of information in them, especially with I2C, and you might not want that all within this main file. It's easier to maintain as a separate file, it's easier to locate because these are all to do with the LCD. You might have another source file to do with menu functionality, another one to do with communications, for example. So we're breaking up our program not only into multiple functions, but also into multiple files. Right, so I use the files as sort of the main root top folder as for example, and then the functions as individual dividers between the functionality within that top folder. Right, so that's how you'd create a new source file. Unfortunately, if we were to try and use some of those functions, we can see, unfortunately, we don't have access to that. You'll see the IntelliSense doesn't know about it. And if we were to try and compile this program, even though the function exists here, and let's say it's correct, I was to try and build this, we're going to get an error. Implicit declaration of function setup LCD. Alright, so you go, oh, okay, well maybe I can just declare this function over here. Okay. While that technically might work, it is not the best way to go about this. Rather than declaring all of the functions located in other source files within your main one, so we're not doing this, what we're going to do is create a header file, just like these ones, a .h, which includes all the function declarations. It can also include variables which are shared between multiple source files. So once again, right clicking, add, and off the side of the screen again, new item, and we're going to go and include file. And I normally, it's up to you, but I normally have one header file for an embedded project that has the same name as what I've got my main C file called as, and within this header file you can add in your function declarations. Alright, so I'm just going to copy just to the header file here each of these. As you know, a declaration has the semicolon on the end of it. And what this basically does is every source file now, which includes this header file, will have access to these functions. So we can now use these functions within any source file, provided that we include it. So include, we'll use quotes because it's part of this project, video demo.h. And if we start writing our setup LCD, you now see IntelliSense knows about it. which means that if I build it, we should have no problems, no warnings, nothing to be concerned about with this particular application. So just to repeat what we've done, we created a new source file, lcd.c, where we declared some new functions within it. Right, these functions are usually all grouped together within a common source file. So you wouldn't have communications and LCD in here, for example. You might just have the LCD and communications somewhere else. In order to be able to use these functions, we have created a header file, and I'm suggesting to use one header file for the whole project, which declares all of these LCD functions. Any function that is declared in this header file is therefore accessible, so you can call it from any source file that includes that header file, okay, by using this include statement up here. Alright, so I can disable LCD and so forth. I can use all of the functions that are contained within that source file. Right, so that's all good. That's how you can basically use this. But I want to give you one more piece of information which might be worth you thinking about in the design of your programs. Currently, I have made all of these functions what is known as public in an object-oriented sense. Public in the sense that these are accessible by all other functions based on the fact they exist in this header file. Sometimes you might have functions like low-level I2C functions, which are for the LCD. Okay, so this one might do some sort of data transfer via I2C to the LCD. Now this is a low-level function, right? Which means that it doesn't need to be called by our main function, or perhaps a menu or anything like that. Right? This one will only ever be used by other functions up here, for example. In that case, I would not recommend that you declare this within our header file. It doesn't need to be accessed by anybody else other than this source file. Okay, in which case I suggest you have a local declaration for functions only used within this source file. So to repeat again, if you have low-level functions or functions which you want to be what are known as private or not accessible by other routines, so other source files, other routines in here is fine, then declare the function locally only. Right? So within the source file itself. Do not put it within the header file. These ones are globally available to all source files which include this header. And that just clogs up space and it complicates matters. We don't need to. It's good practice to hide the ones that you don't use in all other places, in other source files, and declare them only within the file that they're being used. Alright, so we're to rebuild this. Everything should compile without issue, as we see.